This is the Compass Podcast, where we disrupt the everyday with glimpses of the divine. Hello, my name is Ryan Dunn.
And I'm Michelle Maldonado.
Michelle, who are we talking to today?
Today we are talking to Reverend Joseph Yoo. Joseph is the planter of Mosaic Episcopal Church located in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. And he just released a book called When the Saints Go Flying In, not marching in, flying in, which shares some stories that celebrate people from Christian history, a few stories that we might recognize from other popular figures, and ultimately the ongoing story of God working in our lives and everyday people like us.
Yeah, and Joseph has been on Compass before. Most recently, we heard him on our episode about pastors on TikTok. So after this, go back and listen to that. And he writes for our Rethink Church site regularly, in fact, monthly. So he's got a great sense of humor and a knack for disarming through sarcasm, which I think becomes evident in our conversation. So
I'd say so.
Yeah, he lays it on. Yeah. So let's meet or re-meet Joseph Yoo on the Compass Podcast. Joseph Yoo, welcome back to Compass. How goes it with your soul today, man?
Today, a little bit apprehensive. I don't know how deep you want to get into this. Yesterday, we got an email from my son's school saying that a student was caught with a gun. Thankfully, this is a middle school here in Pearland. Middle school is 5th and 6th grade, so it's one of the 5th or 6th graders that brought a gun. But thankfully, he wasn't. He made a threat to a student the day before, brought the gun yesterday, and then in his immaturity, just was handing out bullets to friends, and that's how we found out that he had a gun.
Okay.
But there was no lockdown. It was handled quickly, carefully, and my son didn't know anything about it, or there wasn't a lockdown, so he didn't really know that it didn't affect him. So this morning we were like, do we send him to school or not? But then he really wanted to go, and my wife and I figured if there is the safest day of school, today would be it, because everyone's on high alert and whatnot. So anytime there's a siren goes off, my heart drops just a little bit.
Yeah.
Other than that, doing fine.
Okay.
Other than that.
Yeah, well, it's tough to pull your attention away from things like that. You know, it's like when part of you is walking someplace else. I get it.
Yeah, it's a weird time to be living in. But we won't go into that detail because it might be very divisive that we don't want to get into yet.
Haven't they always said it's a weird time to be living in, though? Like, so you've written this book that touches on the lives of saints, and certainly, like, are you laughing at my transition? Yeah. This is pro tips here on the Compass Podcast. This is how we push it back.
That was smooth. That was really smooth.
Anyways, I lost my train of thought now coming out of that. Like, I had it all laid out. Well, hey, let's talk about saints. Let's just do it that way. Hey, Joseph, let's talk about saints. So, your book, The Saints Go Flying In, is out now. And for you, it kind of came out of a place of, I don't want to say ignorance, but just like something that you got kind of challenged with that you didn't know a great answer for. And what I picked up early in the book is that somebody had actually asked you, like, who your favorite saint was, and you didn't know how to answer it. So now that you've kind of invested some time into it, do you have a favorite saint?
Yeah, it was I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know people had favorite saints. And apparently a lot of people do. And so currently, my favorite one, I'm pretty sure it'll change as the season goes, but where I am in my ministry and where our church is, I relate to St. Jude a lot, because St. Jude is the patron saint of lost causes. And which I always thought was, when I learned that, I thought it was really funny that St. Jude is also the representation of the Children's Hospital.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so he's, like the sick children are lost causes. Like, what is going on here? But I just like the idea that there is a saint for those who might feel like they are a lost cause. But then, the question is, if if we are children of God, is anyone really a lost cause, right?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the idea with the Children's Hospital, right? That, kind of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat in a way.
Well, the story of why and I did write this in this book, but so Saint Jude is a saint of lost causes because his name is very similar to Judas the Iscariot, and so traditionally no one wants to pray to Judas in the sense that they might be afraid that they're praying to the betrayer, the Iscariot. So the fact that you pray to St. Jude means that you're like the desperate of the desperate of the desperate, like anyone just please hear me, help me, like send this message to Jesus, whoever's there. But the founder of St. Jude was a struggling actor, and he was having a baby on the way and had really no means to like provide, so he was really stressed out. So one day he said a quick prayer on behalf of St. Jude and said, hey, if you get this message to Jesus and help me get gigs, I will return the favor. And he, I think he was one of the most, he was a very successful radio star or something, and kept his end of the bargain and started St. Jude.
That's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't either.
It's like cue the meme, the more you know.
Right.
So you come out of a faith tradition that doesn't really hold those people from the past in such a high regard like other faith traditions. So what inspired you about those saints to really like go for it?
Part of it was my whole career has shifted into a new denomination and whatnot, and I was just learning the new ropes of everything, and it was such a silly question, like who's your favorite saint? And I was sitting at the table and everyone had one, and I'm like, I almost felt like peer pressure into finding one. And
you didn't just want to trump and say Jesus?
Right. I should have, but that would have been really funny. Jesus juke people. But I just thought, like, well, why are these people? I grew up in a tradition where I grew up in a Methodist church, but it operated as a fairly evangelical church. And there was this always anti-Catholicism thing that was built in our faith journey. Like the last Korean church I worked at, even though I was way beyond that, they gave out tracts to the church members to give to other people. And for those of you that don't know, tracts are little pamphlets that tells you to believe in Jesus. These tracts were actually cartoons. And this one was specifically, this man goes to sleep, he wakes up, and he's dead, and he's in hell. And Satan, or the devil, is like giving him a tour of hell. And the guy's like, why am I in hell? I was a good Christian. And the devil goes, no, you were a Catholic. And,
geez.
And like, goes to this, you gave too much power to Mother Mary, you pray to the saints and whatnot, and the tract ends with the guy waking up and being relieved that it's a dream, and then he denounces Catholicism and prays the sinner's prayer, and he becomes a quote-unquote real Christian. So that's the kind of like environment I grew up in. And so I had no idea who these saints were. You would hear things like St. Patrick because, March 17th,
right.
Or St. Francis because almost everyone knows St. Francis, but that was about it. So the fact that people had different saints and reasons why they liked them and what spoke to them, I was like, well, I want to be able to answer this question confidently next time. So I just started searching and just reading about little tidbits on Wikipedia about certain things. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fascinating. And then I would see stories where I could use it in a sermon, and then it just kept snowballing after that.
I love that part of your research includes Wikipedia.
It was predominantly Wikipedia.
So vindicated in a way. Like, all right, that's legitimate. I understand. That's wonderful. I want to know, so you talk about the kind of the venerated saints within your book. I mean, the people who like officially have saint attached to their name, so there's Saint David and Saint Augustine and those folks. But you also talk about other people of faith formation within the book. So it just kind of triggers for me a question of, from your perspective, what makes a saint?
For me, I just anyone that's really living out their faith loudly and boldly is, I would consider, as a saint with a lowercase s, I suppose. But like we've all people who've mentored us, people who've inspired us, people who've really taught us what it truly means to follow Jesus Christ. Those are people who put up with us as Sunday school kids. Like those are truly saints in their own right. Every once in a while we'll sing This Little Light of Mine for church, and my worship leader loves to sing this. I guess the second verse, hide it under a bushel, no. And every time I sing that, I can't stop laughing, because I remember as a 9-year-old, I would say, hide it under a bush, hell no. And just laughing. And looking back, I'm just like, I'm pretty sure the Sunday school teacher wanted to kill me, but couldn't, because I'm the pastor's kid, So like, she is a saint in her own right. So like, anyone who really dares to live out their faith in a bold and loud and manner I would think is a saint in my book.
So we heard a little bit about some of the findings you made with like the history of St. Jude and the hospital choosing that name. But are there any other surprising things you discovered during this research that really stick out? Yes.
St. Catherine of I was going to say Bologna, but it's not. Bologna? How do we get Bologna from our spelling the way we spell Bologna?
I've always wondered that, actually.
So I learned two things about her. She was a very gifted artist and like had a lot of prayer written when in times that, not many women were given that kind of privilege. But I can't think of the exact word. There's sometimes a body doesn't corrupt because they've been blessed by the Spirit or something. And incorruptible body, maybe that is it. Anyway, her body is still displayed at the church, at her church. And if you Google it, you see this, you can see it. And once I saw it, like, I had to go and watch like a bunch of Disney movies because it scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, I still can't it's such a, religion can be so weird at times. Like this bot, I think the legend goes that, after they buried her, they started smelling roses in where her body was. So they dug her up and she wasn't decomposed. So then they put her in her habit and just she's displayed in her church. And personally, like I'm always afraid of churches at night because like, it's just creepy. And like, I remember my last church, there was a lot of wood. So, I on Saturday nights, I'd go at church at night, because I knew that, the custodial staff they were all gone. So I could run through my sermon without any interruptions. And then I just sit there, kind of like gather my notes, and you hear all these noises creaking and cracking. And I'm like, I think I saw something move, and like, I'm getting really scared. I just couldn't imagine how I would feel if I knew that there was a dead body in front of the window for everyone to see. I'm out. I can't go to that church ever. But that was one of them. I mean, it had nothing to do with anything, but it was just so like shocking and jarring. Like I thought they were making it up, but when I Googled it, Google never lies, hopefully. So, but that was, I'm still like a little bit shook by that. I think they're called incorruptible bodies. Somehow, some way, God doesn't allow them to decay.
Was there anybody who you came across that you would really love to have worked in the book, but you just couldn't figure out how? Like, just such a cool, compelling story that you're like, oh, man.
My original 9, 10, including my son, who's not a real saint, but Godiva was one of them. But then I started looking around, and apparently Godiva is not an official saint. But the reason I found her so fascinating is that we get the phrase peeping Tom from Godiva's story. Her husband was like this ruler and taxed his people very, very heavily. And the people started complaining, and she had such a compassion for them. So she went to her husband and says, you got to lay off. You got to, cut down the taxes. Your people are going to, they're dying under your rule. And he basically said, hey, if you walk the streets naked, I will I will hear your cause. So she ordered all the townspeople to be in their house and, be away from the window while she rode on horseback naked. And apparently a lot of depictions of Godiva is on a horse with her hair covering, but except for there's this one guy named Tom who happened to take a look. And from that point on, he was a peeping Tom. I don't know how I was going to work that in.
Right.
Like, looking back, I'm glad that she wasn't a saint, because I'm like, well, there was such a fascinating tidbit I really like the way, like, we get the origins of our phrases and whatnot. So the fact that I discovered that's where we get peeping Tom from was a source of joy for me.
That is interesting.
And now she represents chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
I was wondering what the connection was there, but
yeah.
Anything? Did you come up? Like, was she also a chocolatier? Or
I think her boldness and her bravery is what the website said. Godiva is
that's what
the
they're
chocolate
celebrating.
website.
Yeah,
The chocolate's website.
Okay.
So yeah.
I don't know how to segue from chocolate to this, so I'll just, I'm not even going to attempt.
We're gonna throw out all transitions here. Let's jump to the next. Yep.
I wanted to ask you about the cover of your book, because it's interesting. For those who aren't looking at it, it's this really cool, like, blue with I believe that's a goose.
A goose, a pigeon, and a dove.
Yes.
No, a goose, a dove, and a sparrow. I'm sorry.
Yeah. In that order. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are the symbolisms for the three different birds, and why you chose them?
First, shout out to Kayla Gabayo, who's the artist. I met her husband through a TikTok live, and they were going through some stuff with their church and said, I need some advice. And I was like, email me. And we've kept in touch ever since, and then found out that he's a great musician and she's an artist. And I was like, hey, I have an idea for this book. Would you mind doing this? Anyway, that's also... I have a much more crude version of that on my, as a tattoo on my right side of the chest. And it's here because there's no way that my parents could see it. Like, there's no reason for me to be shirtless in front of my parents.
Define crude.
You mean just art-wise, it's just an outline.
That's what okay.
I just realized when you said crude, so it's not as artistic and pretty. I wish I met
Where
Kayla
can you go
first.
with that with a pigeon and a... Anyways.
So,
back on topic.
my parents have the book. I don't know if they've read it. My parents, English is still their second language, so I don't know if I think they're just proud to have a book with my name on it. But, cause I haven't gotten the phone call yet saying, you have a tattoo, or they're just ignoring it. But the song Three Little Birds came, at a time where I was just, I truly felt it was a message from God in a time that I was experiencing like the worst professional season of my life. And it just served as a reminder that God was with me. And when that happened, the theme Three Little Birds would be appearing everywhere, like where I could not ignore it. And, like looking back, I truly fully believe those were just little messages from God saying, reminding me that I'm not alone. On top of that, during this wilderness phase of my career, I discovered that the Celtic symbol of the Holy Spirit is a goose. Oh. And I just really, really resonated with that because goose are just, like you see those videos where the mother goose is like chasing after men, and people like they're close to their nest and they just won't. They're relentless and they're chasing and the human being is like 5 times bigger than she is and she doesn't care and she just goes after them. Like the Holy Spirit being like that, representing that, like really, really spoke to me. And then I think I even wrote this an article for Ryan on this. But pigeon and a dove scientifically don't have that much difference. They're essentially the same animal. And just thought it really curious that doves are venerated and pigeons are like ill. My friend would call it rats with wings. And I can't remember this person's name, but he did a study and he says the reason why humans hate pigeons so much is they don't stay in their lane. They keep crossing places where we think it's humans only. And so, and just as a scavenger, as a person that continually crosses borders without permission, that spoke to me as the Holy Spirit. And then just one time in my devotional when I was feeling really low, I opened randomly and came across a passage where Jesus said, "Aren't you worth more than 2 sparrows?" And so those birds with the song 3 Little Birds were just a rally cry for me to get through the season, and enough to get my first tattoo at the age of 39. Still scared of my parents.
Well, are you familiar with the Lent madness phenomenon?
I was not until you emailed me that, and I've been like looking. I was like, "What is this?"
Yeah, well, for other people who want to get clued in, every year at Lent, they're actually Episcopalians capitalize on kind of the March Madness craze and form a bracket of saints who kind of go head to head in competition with each other. And really it's all decided by people voting. So, I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity to just kind of learn about the lives of some of these people. And they do a really good job of researching out not just some of the more, I guess, popular or well-known saints, but some folks who might be a little lesser known as well. It's really cool. So, and then you get to vote for basically your favorite one.
Lent Madness.
Lent Madness. LentMadness.org. Yeah. And I cross-referenced this year's bracket, Joseph, with the saints that you specifically mentioned in the book. The only one that overlaps is David of Wales. And unfortunately, I think he's got a tough bracket because he's going up against Augustine of Hippo, which I think is, kind of like, I don't know, the Duke UNC type.
Yeah.
Taking charge. You think little David stands a chance?
No, because the only reason why I used, so I was telling Ryan earlier that Michelle that I don't know anything about the things. I use stories to like kind of leverage to tell another story. So the reason why I chose Saint David is because he's the patron saint of doves. And I wanted to include I wanted to include a dove story in my. But the reason why he's a dove is one of the. I think to be officially canonized by the church as an official saint, you have to have like miracles attributed to you, and some of these stories of these saints, like the older they are, like the more further back in history, they sound like almost mythical, like Greek mythology. So David, Saint David was a very well-known preacher. Everyone loved he was a great preacher, and one day he was preaching outside, and people couldn't see him or hear him, and all of a sudden the ground just rose from the ground, and it became a hill. And then when that happened, a dove landed on his shoulder. So that's why he became the patron saint of doves. But like St. Augustine, most people know St. Augustine more than they would know St. David. And even so much that they know the mother, Monica, who I think that's Monica. Yeah, Monica, who prayed for her son's salvation because he wanted nothing to do with the church and whatnot. And one of my favorite quotes about the church is attributed to St. Augustine, but I don't know if it's PG-13. I think Ryan knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we've already mentioned it on this podcast, so go ahead.
Oh, the church is a whore, but she's also my mother.
Yeah. I feel like somebody else already broke that ground there. So,
oh my gosh.
All right, awkward segue time.
So, I was just going to ask, so how are we transitioning from that?
I'm all about awkward. Awkward's my spiritual gift.
This from the guy who compares the Holy Spirit to a pigeon.
Yeah. No, like seriously, like I think I shared the story on the book too. But one of my first memorial services, I say to the mourning family as we're like wrapping up, I'm like, "Have a good day," and then I like froze because I realized what I said to the people that just buried their loved one, and like I should have just left it because people excuse it because like it's such a habit. But no, not me. I had to add, considering. Why am I like this? So yeah, I'm just a ball of awkwardness. So segue from that now. It's easier than the other one, I assume.
I'm going to throw it back at you just to ask, what's coming next for you? Now what are you working on?
Nothing.
Okay.
The only thing I have on my calendars is the articles for UMC.org. Honestly, I was so over it after the book was. I thought it would be fun. That fun lasted about 2 months, and then the writer block hit. And then my wife works a night shift as a chaplain in a children's hospital. So when she would go to work, I'd stay up, and it was so quiet. You know, my son sleeping and just me in the house, and my son in his room. And so that I thought that would be a great time to use to like type away and whatnot. And it was fun. And then when the writer's block hit, I thought, I should have a glass of wine while I'm doing this to loosen up. And next thing you know, I wake up the next morning. I'm like, oh, I was drunk. Let's see what I wrote. Nope, can't use that. But honestly, right now, we are in a different season of our church plant. So I just want to make sure that I give full attention to that. And if something comes up or an idea strikes, I might tackle it, see where it goes. But as of now, like, I'm done. I'm retired.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about that church plan a little bit. We got a few more minutes. So tell us where you're at and what you're doing. You planted the church Mosaic and in the midst of the pandemic, right?
Well, we were very fortunate in the sense that pandemic happened before we officially started anything. Like a couple of my colleagues were 3-4 months in when the pandemic hit, and they've had a hard time trying to get that momentum back. So for us, we didn't have any, like, we lost a lot of momentum for sure, but we didn't have, like, it worked out for us. But now we're about a year and a half of meeting in person. And we're just trying to our focus really is to create space for people who feel like they don't have a space in the church. But the thing is, we live in Houston, and we live in a suburb of Houston called Pearland, and it's very, very conservative, evangelical. And I realized if I had gone the old, like, Baptist non-denominational route, we'd probably be a lot more people in the church, if so to speak. But the people that I want to connect with that who've been either burned or turned off by their church don't want to come back. Rightfully so. Like, I don't blame them. So I have a lot of coffees and lunch with people who want to connect with me. But anytime the idea of the church comes up, like, do you ever want to swing by? Or, we're doing this with the church. They're like, no, I can't. I'm not ready yet. So I picked the wrong demographic to plant a church for. But we are out there, and we're not going to ever force someone to come to church. I completely, when they see that I'm clergy, they kind of like pause and are very self-conscious. Like, I understand that we as a church, capital C, have done a lot of things for them to feel that way. So essentially, I just want to connect with people and get to know their stories. And if they ever feel like they need a community, our doors are always open for them. So it's easier said than done, because I'm like, man, I wish you could come to church, because then I can tell my boss that I could count you officially and be like, hey, look, newcomer and whatever. But that's not, if that's what we make church to be, then we've lost.
Yeah, but you're doing such an important work, just letting these people take their time, because they do have this trauma with the church. The church is so responsible for a lot of trauma, and I use that word. Yeah, trauma.
And I think one of the most fascinating things that I've learned is when some of these people have started making started reconciling with people, and they've repaired relationships, mend relationship with their parents who caused a lot of trauma, religious trauma too, but they're not ready to do that with the church. And so I'm like, that for me, that signifies that church scar was far deeper than the relationship scars, and that really sucks. But hopefully, we'll find ways to let them know that whenever they're ready, if they're ever wanting to find space in the community, there are churches and communities that are ready and willing to love them for who they are and help them be the best version of them that they can be. So, yeah.
Well, where can they look you up?
My website, josephyu.com, and yeah, I guess, and mosaicpearland.org is our church website.
Okay. Cool. Well, hey, thanks for sharing stories with us, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, we have been disrupted by looking at the lives of the past, so we may discern the divine presence in our present day stories. Thanks for taking this walk with us. The Compass Podcast is brought to you by United Methodist Communications. And if Compass is meaningful for you, then check out another episode. If you like this one, then you definitely want to go back and listen to Pastors of TikTok. Of course, Joseph was in that episode as well. Or if history is your thing, then check out the ongoing History of Hell that was released in October of 2022. While you're listening, go ahead and leave a rating and or review. That would be so appreciated. Compass comes out every other Wednesday, unless, of course, we're interrupted by a holiday, in which case we'll just hit you the following week. But we'll be back online in 2 weeks in this case, so we'll chat at you then. Peace.